It's like you're trying to walk through a doorway holding a ladder. Okay folks, I'm back with another very innovative focal length made from Canon. It was released much earlier this year. It kind of flew under my radar, mostly because I don't shoot with a lot of zoom lenses. But after I reviewed the newly released Canon 35 1.4 RF VCM lens and found that Canon had really leaned into a trade-off of in-lens distortion for a lighter weight product, even extreme in-lens distortion for red-ringed, very expensive lenses for the trade-off of an overall lighter lens. You can check my review out if you want to hear my opinion about that. I became very curious about how other very expensive, this is a $3,000 24 to 105 f2.8 throughout the entire zoom range, $3,000 lens. Very curious how Canon was approaching distortion with all of their new lineup. And I have to say, it is very obvious to me that Canon is designing a lot of their latest releases with video as the priority. And that might be a really obvious thing to say. Maybe everybody on YouTube, on the internet already knows that. I don't know. I don't keep up with other reviews or other people's opinions about things. I see a lens that I'm interested in, think it might work for my workflow, I buy it, I try it, I have an opinion, I keep it or I don't. And unfortunately, as much as I wanted to really, really love this lens, I was really trying to force myself to love this lens as much as I wanted to. Now the build quality is actually really quite good. I love the feel of the zoom. You really don't have to move it that much before it's all the way through the range. I like the manual override of focus. This feels really nice and rubber bandy in a way. And then of course they have the customizable ring, which I really like when it actually has the snappies. But Canon seems to be kind of all over the place in terms of whether that is going to be a tactile feel, where you can actually feel that, which I really prefer, or if it's going to be really smooth. It seems like they keep it smooth for video-oriented lenses, and then for ones where they don't care, it's got the actual tactile feel. The problem with that is this is clearly a video-first lens in its design. And there's a few reasons I think that, but one dead giveaway is that in order to enable the aperture ring, you have to hold the button, and then you can have manual control over your aperture ring, which is great, I guess. I don't know how often that's really super necessary in the video world to change your aperture with a smooth, quiet setting while you're actually filming. I don't know why that's a thing, but that is only available in video mode. If you change the aperture and you're taking stills, nothing happens. You have to use the aperture built into your camera, which is really odd, and I just find that just a continuously confusing design feature. The other thing, though, that makes me think this is primarily designed for video is it's got a permanently affixed mount. Now, I took the mount off. This is actually like an L bracket type thing to mount to a tripod really easily. That's great. That's super helpful to have, but that really needs to be entirely modular. And this whole ring has this nub attached that I've tried everything and can't seem to remove. It's got a protruding screw on there, so it's just stuck there. And that is very much in your way as you're shooting. You might be able to leverage it a little bit to help balance or something, but if you don't shoot with a tripod, this is really annoying, pulling in and out of your bag and everything else. Now, of course, it's got an array of pretty familiar different stabilizations and manual focus versus autofocus, and then of course the ability to limit the range that focus will track and rack through, which is really great. At the end of the day, even though I do believe this is primarily a video first lens, I could see a lot of photographers that do normally shoot to a tripod, maybe sport or animal photographers or something, using this. But I'm primarily a portrait and wedding photographer, and I thought this would maybe replace that 24 to 70, maybe that 28 to 70, which is a huge lens. But that is a 24 to some range is typically sort of the mid-length range that a lot of wedding photographers, if they shoot zoom, really love and enjoy to shoot with. Unfortunately, I just can't bring myself to really love using this at a wedding. And one major reason for that, and maybe this is something that over time you could get used to, I don't know, but wider lenses, even primes that are with really wide open apertures, tend to have a really short amount of protrusion from the camera mount to the end of the lens, maybe about just this far. But it is a very weird sensation to be shooting at 24 millimeter with a lens that's about the size of a 70 to 200. We'll go through the images in just a minute, but a friend of mine that shot with it during cocktail hour at a wedding described it, I think, perfectly. It's like you're trying to walk through a doorway holding a ladder. And if you've ever done that, that should perfectly put you back in the feeling of what it's like to try and balance a ladder walking through a doorway. I typically, if I'm shooting wide, especially for candids, I'm getting in quite close to people. During getting ready, it's a really cramped room, or during dancing, I'm like right up in there, surrounded by people. And I'm moving left to right a lot, and this giant lens is something that I'm just not used to and feels super dangerous, to be honest, like being right up next to people. So that is a weird sensation and a feeling that I've never seen in a lens this size. The 28 to 70 kind of hits that, but 28 millimeter actually isn't nearly as wide feeling as 24. Things get really almost exponential the way they change, the wider you get. It doesn't take much to have a drastic difference between a 24 and a 28. Overall, the build quality is fantastic, and Canon definitely knows how to build, on the outside, a really solid lens. Oh, I should also note, there's no interior VCM motor, so the thing doesn't jiggle when it's in your hand and not connected to your camera. That is something I really didn't like about the 35 1.4. Let's dive into some actual photos. I've got about 30 pulled up here. I've taken nearly 10,000 across 2 different weddings, but this is the wedding I thought showed the most range of what this thing can do. And I'll leave my settings on here, the metadata in the upper left corner, but you can rest assured I was almost always at f2.8, at least as far as aperture went. So here's an example. I walked in and wanted to just test right away the close focus ability, and I'm not sure of the exact close distance, but it is quite close enough for what you would ever need with detail shots. It gets very close to this tiara and these rings here. No problem there. The lens is insanely sharp. I will give it that. Very sharp. And the way it renders bokeh, like this is a close-up classic shot at a wedding day, tight in at like 70 mil or something like that, trying to get just a nice picture of the bouquet. It's a really nice flattering fall off with the, in my opinion, with the way that it renders the bokeh. And it's completely subjective, and probably everybody's gonna have a different opinion on that. Here's where I was shooting, where the sun was kind of lower in the sky. This is probably around like 6 o'clock in the afternoon in New Jersey. And I was starting to get a little bit of this like weird bokeh artifact happening around her head, but I kind of liked it. I saw it happening and leaned into it a bit for this moment. But I really could not get this lens to flare. You'll see in some later sunset pictures, I actually exaggerated and added some of the white vignette around here just to isolate the bride in the middle with her mom. But yeah, this lens is crazy sharp. That's one of the things I keep thinking about, and that's a really great positive, although I think sharpness can be a little bit unnecessary or overrated, because you can do a lot of sharpening in post. But here's where I'm torn. Aside from just the weird size for the range that it covers, I wanna just show you what it looks like with no lens corrections applied. Now, that's not so bad, right? This is I'm zoomed in here, probably 57 mil. And I would say it tracks that 57 or 50 around, all the way up to 105. The distortion is quite minimal with this lens. It's very usable. Now, I always pull back the vignette correction because I like natural vignette in a lot of my lenses. But let's find a shot that's a little bit wider. Maybe this one of the couple? Yeah. So this is 27 mil. I'm gonna turn the distortion off. It's not awful. It's not terrible. This is cropped in though for straightening. So let's turn it on and off here. You can start to see, especially like the outer 25% edges of the frame, that distortion is getting pretty crazy. But let's try one of these photos. So I'm at the widest end, 24 millimeter. And like I said, from 50 millimeter onward, it's not too bad. This is not an edited photo. It's got my preset applied, but it's not like dialed in with editing. But things tend to get, I hesitate to use the word exponential because I'm not sure if it's actually that, but quite quickly, things, the wider you go, get massively more distorted. So we're at 24, this is the widest we can go. I'm gonna turn the distortion off and look at that. They have really pushed the limits of where they think they can design a lens to be technically a 24 millimeter when it's corrected for distortion. Now you have the added step, if you want this range of the lens to be usable, you have to apply a profile to correct for that. And many people probably assume, fine, that's great. I can do that on import, everything will render. What's the big deal? One, when I'm paying $3,000 for glass, I expect it to look exactly as it does in camera with how it's going to look in a raw file. I want to be able to, at a minimum, disable distortion correction in the camera body. So I know that is exactly what's in my framing, in my camera body through the EVF or the screen on the back is what's going to be in the raw file. And right now, for some reason, I'm guessing because the distortion is so extreme, Canon doesn't allow you to disable the distortion correction in camera body 100%. It's always going to have some applied, it seems like no matter what. That's something, of course, that's a software limitation. I'm sure they could change if they wanted to, but they probably don't want people seeing in the back of their camera the actual edges where it doesn't cover the full sensor. That's crazy. Now, here's another reason why I'm so against this approach. In my other video, the 3514 VCM review, I dive a little more into how even though you correct for distortion and it says you're at 6,000 by 4,000 resolution, you're actually not. You are definitely cropping in and losing resolution. It doesn't say you are because they're padding pixels or just upscaling in a way that is essentially a little cheat code where it says it's the number of pixels, 6,000 by 4,000, but it's not. It actually is quite significantly. You're losing resolution. But aside from even that, now I or any user are beholden to the profile that Adobe or whatever camera or whatever manufacturer brand name software you use, a lot of people use Adobe stuff. You are now beholden to their ability to create a profile. And with this lens specifically, there's already been a big issue. The very, very first release that they made, the lens would correct for the profile, but have this weird glitch. It was essentially a bug where it would stretch and skew the outer edges. That's not good. And it took them only a couple of weeks to correct for, maybe not a huge deal, but it was still something where it's like, what else might be going wrong here? And I will tell you, the version 2 that they issued as a correction, version 2 here, actually did fix the problem where there is no more like streaking or like stretched pixel padding, or I don't know where it's coming from exactly. Probably something to do with the fact that they're trying to correct for distortion but maintain resolution. But the problem with the version 2 that they put out is if you take a picture of the back of your camera screen and look at the raw file with the profile corrected now, it's actually wider in the corrected version of the raw file than the original image that you took. Now, a lot of people might think, oh, you can just crop in to match, but I don't want to have to do that. I want the legwork of what I'm doing in the moment to capture what I'm seeing. That's great if we get a little bit more width out of something than was otherwise originally in the frame that I saw. But I don't want that as the default setting and perspective of the shot of the raw file that I'm editing in my camera. And that's just one circumstance where now being beholden to another layer of your editing process that you are just assuming is going to be right all the time is a big problem. The other thing is, I'm not quite sure that a lot of software allows you to selectively apply profile correction based on the lens that you're shooting. So if you want this to be automated when you're importing, that's great. But I'm pretty sure if you use Lightroom or any of the Adobe products, you can only create custom versions of a preset that's applied related to the camera body or the camera serial number specifically. They don't right now, I don't think, let you apply something per lens that's attached. Let me know if there's a way to do that. But that's a big deal for me because a lot of my lenses don't have this trade-off. I don't have to think about distortion correction unless I want to be really particular, because a lot of lenses, yes, they do have distortion, and a lot of photographers like to correct for that right out of the gate. My main lenses, I don't care. The distortion in lens looks totally fine, and I like it a little bit, so I keep it off. And there's no way that I can see to automatically, selectively apply distortion to a lens like this and then not apply it to other lenses that I prefer to just leave untouched. Let's just fly on through a few other photos that I made with this that I made with this lens. You know, I shot many hours. This was a pretty standard wedding day up in New Jersey, and it's a very capable lens for certainly any photographer that is a professional. It's gonna do a good enough job. But again, I just really cannot get on board with this approach to using to designing lenses that are very expensive and should have as little distortion as possible, in my opinion, in the glass, designing it with the assumption that people are just going to correct for it in post. That's weird. And if you're on board with that logic because it makes it a lighter lens or whatever, get on board, it's new technology, then why even bother designing a lens that has bokeh, right? In Lightroom, you can apply lens blur after the fact, and it will mask and selectively do a very good job of isolating your subject from the background. Why not just design all lenses with letting in as much light as possible, but we don't really care about the quality of the bokeh render because you can apply it and adjust it in post. So we're just gonna leave that up to you and design the entire lens under the presumption that you're gonna add or control your blur in post. That, I think, makes it much more obvious for a lot of people, maybe that you're on the fence about this or you don't see the reasoning as to why I'm so annoyed. I think that example, which I could logically see camera manufacturers jumping to, if they haven't already, is one where I hope all of you can understand the value and the money that you're putting into a lens like this really needs to come through in the actual baseline raw files that you're starting with, not all the tweaks and stuff you can do after the fact. Anyway, my rant is over. I really appreciate Canon trying something new in their approach. I'm always curious and interested to see what is happening on the bleeding edge of innovation and just what trends and directions the industry is heading. And I really, really hope Canon heads in another direction. At a bare minimum, please, Canon, start to denote when you're taking this approach, either designing a lens that's primarily probably for video more than it is still photo, make a denotation somewhere about that. Or when a lens has quite a lot of distortion built into it, with the assumption that photographers are gonna be able to correct for it in post. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm always curious about people's feedback. As always, thank you so much for your attention, and I'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.